Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for gathering after the lunch. This is the toughest time for any conference, really, to perform in a way so you are satisfied with information that we're going to deliver, because now the food is in, so it's the time for digestion, not the intellectual digestion. But we're going to try to make it interesting, but interesting not because of the data that we're going to share, but also the stories we're going to share, but also the lessons learned that we're going to share today. Who are we and what we're going to do? So we are here to see the discussion on destruction of the agriculture sector in Ukraine and the food securities and insecurities that this destruction has unfortunately provided to Ukraine and to the broader world. I'm going to introduce the panelists right now with me, starting from my right. Damian Sobol, Emergency Relief Coordinator for World Central Kitchen in Poland. Welcome, Damian. Roman Nader, researcher with the Center of Food and Land Use Research at the Kyiv School of Economics. Roman, welcome. Then we have Alexander Ryban, Deputy Minister of Economic Development in Ukraine. And we have Yaroslav Romanchuk, who is attorney-in-law at Managing Partner at Yukon Legal Group, but also a president of the Ukrainian Business Association in Poland. And this is not all. We also have another person who is going to be with us in a moment. We're going to start with the video from the member of Sejm of Republic of Poland, Rafał Romanowski. Please see the screen right now.
Szanowni Państwo, drodzy uczestnicy Kongresu Świat dla Ukrainy 2022. Wstępnie chciałem serdecznie przeprosić Państwa w imieniu własnym, ale również w imieniu pana premiera Henryka Kowalczyka, że nie możemy uczestniczyć w Waszym kongresie. Niestety nasze zobowiązania i wcześniejsze plany nie pozwoliły na dzisiejszy udział, ale chcemy podzielić się kilkoma dosyć istotnymi refleksjami dotyczącymi sytuacji geopolitycznej, która ma miejsce po 24 lutego 2022 roku, czyli po bestialskim napadzie Rosji na Ukrainę. Niestety państwa rolnictwo Ukrainy boryka się z wieloma problemami. Z tymi problemami w związku z tym boryka się świat, dlatego że Ukraina jest spichlerzem Europy od wielu, wielu lat. Z Ukrainy ta żywność czy też surowce były eksportowane w różne części świata. Afryka, część północna Afryki, część subsaharyjska Afryki oczekuje właśnie choćby ukraińskiego ziarna. Dlatego musimy uczynić wszystko, aby to ziarno, aby te surowce, te rośliny oleiste, te gotowe oleje spożywcze mogły docierać do różnych części świata. Bardzo dobrze się stało, że ten tak zwany kanał czarnomorski został w jakikolwiek sposób przywrócony, ale musimy też uczynić wszystko, aby Europa, aby Polska stała się, zaznaczam to bardzo wyraźnie, krajem tranzytowym dla surowców żywnościowych wytworzonych właśnie w Ukrainie. Stąd czynimy wszystko, aby przejścia graniczne nasze naprawdę działały na bardzo wysokim poziomie, aby stabilność tych przejść była bardzo ważnym elementem, jeżeli chodzi o tranzyt surowców wytworzonych właśnie w Ukrainie, czy też zbóż, czy też kukurydzy, czy też roślin oleistych, czy też innych produktów, czy też surowców żywnościowych eksportowanych z Ukrainy do różnych części kraju. Ministerstwo Rolnictwa
The Ministry of Agriculture is doing whatever it can so that inspections that we supervise can be very helpful and contribute to smooth operations of border crossings. As the government of the Republic of Poland, we do whatever we can at the level of the EU so that solidarity channels, solidarity routes are efficient and open, so that it is not a responsibility for one credible partner, which is the Republic of Poland, but so that responsibility is shouldered by the whole European Union, and all the obligations undertaken by the European Union can be implemented all the time. We participate in various discussions in DGs of the European Commission, and we highlight that there is a need of joint investments of Poland and Ukraine in border crossings as well. But I want to say that we need to make more efforts to find solutions which are system-wide solutions facilitating exportation of food produce from Ukraine, which are absolutely indispensable in various corners of the continent and various corners of the globe, because this food produce is expected in Africa and other parts of the globe. So we have to make even more efforts jointly and to take steps towards the European Commission in order to reflect the expectations of the Ukrainian partner. I would like, and Henryk Kowalczyk would like, the grains from Ukraine crossing Polish border to be transited further on to these parts of the continent and these parts of the globe where it is most expected. We cannot compete with our Polish food producers, but we have to do whatever we can so that these grains reaches Baltic seaports, North Sea ports, Western Europe, and further on in various global directions. So we can hope for our credible partnership, you can hope for our support, but we also expect your full understanding where we implement new system-wide solutions for border crossings to become a system or efficient transit of products manufactured in Ukraine. Thank you for your invitation. As I have mentioned, we are going to continue our cooperation. We are going to be the partner of Free Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Romanowski with these words. From what I've heard and how I understood, and this is the topic that we're gonna explore together with you. The problem is not only drastic, but it has a systemic root right now, and I'd like to explore it with each of you. You have various perspectives on this. So we're gonna start in a moment with Roman's research, and you will share the data that will actually set the tone for the whole conversation. Then I'm probably gonna go with you, Alexander, on how the ministry is actually tackling the problem. Then we'll go to our Polish friends, our Polish side, how World Central Kitchen was actually reacting in the first place, and how is the situation with the food crisis for you now. Then we're gonna go with you on understanding, and you helping a lot of businesses from Ukraine to relocate, and you've been helping to do that since 2015, and now since the war started, you've done it as well for the agricultural clients. And I wanna see the decline or actually incline, the rise of the amount of companies that agricultural companies they moved to Poland, and how this affected the market. But also, then I wanna have a discussion in between you, not only me, on what we're gonna discover. So first, Roman, let's start with your research on how much Ukraine has lost, and what is this cost of loss, and which domains of agricultural sector, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here. I'm Roman Nazar from Kyiv School of Economics. I am senior researcher at Center for Food and Land Use Economics. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about damages, losses, and talk a little bit about needs and my view on what the needs should be. The first two things are damages and losses, and what's the difference between those two? The damages is damages to physical infrastructure, destroyed machinery, destroyed storage facilities, destroyed some production units. Losses is a foregone revenue. So now here in Ukraine we have like $6.6 billion in damages. So we have $6.6 billion in destroyed agricultural infrastructure. And there is a big asterisk on that because it doesn't take into account the damage to the farmland. Throughout this whole section, I'm not going to talk about damage to the farmlands as kind of a separate category. So at the same time, we have more than $34 billion in losses. So our farmers, our agricultural producers lost way more money in their revenues than they lost in assets. And that's something quite unique for the situation we are now in. If you're talking about the damages, the biggest category of damages is damages to machinery. Destroyed and damaged machinery is like $2.9, I believe, million in damages. Yeah. Claude?
Just, be more loud.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Is it any better?
If you want to continue on that, not only on the damages and the losses and damage to machinery, but go on further on the amount of money that we've lost and we will not receive because of this damage, then you can go on, if you have that data.
Yeah, I have the data.
Go ahead.
I have some cheat sheet right on me. Yes, but the second problem we faced and the crisis we more or less solved at this point is that we have almost $2 billion more than $1 billion, $1.1 billion in damages to storage facilities. So right after the invasion, we had quite a lot of discussions that, okay, we're gonna collect the harvest, but we have no place to put them. And a lot of our harvest is gonna be destroyed, damaged, it's gonna be full with fungi, and so on and so forth. Luckily, our Ukrainian producers, they managed to solve this problem. They use all kinds of storage methods to preserve the harvest, but nonetheless. The second biggest category is stolen grain and oilseeds. We actually cannot draw a line between stolen and damaged because of imperfections in our surveys, but nonetheless, it's almost $2 billion. Fun fact, a couple of days ago, NASA went up with a new number that we've lost like $1 billion due to stealing of grain from the occupied territories. They are talking about losses caused by someone taking over control over the farmlands, and collecting the harvest planted by Ukrainian producers. I'm talking about these grains and oilseeds that were in the storage facilities. Yeah, that's pretty much it for damages, and we can go on losses because there's quite a few highlights that gonna shape the future of Ukrainian agriculture.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in general we have more than $34 billion in losses.
24.
34.
34.
34 billion. And the single biggest category of these losses is the losses caused by the logistic disruption. What happened after the Russian invasion? Russia imposed a naval blockade on Ukrainian ports. And just for a bit of context, 95% of all Ukrainian food products were exported through Ukrainian naval ports. This channel of export was halted. And it remained halted up until, I believe, the middle of summer or something like that. But nonetheless, we lost our main export channel. The logistic costs went up, they skyrocketed. And at the same time, the demand for grain here in Ukraine went down because we cannot export as much as we do. We are talking about export-oriented commodities like corn, barley, sunflower, wheat, and there's not all that much buyers for these products anymore. Therefore, the price went down. When the whole world faced a crisis with skyrocketing prices for agricultural commodities, Ukrainian producers started to receive less and less money. This problem was supposed to be solved with a so-called grain deal between Ukraine, Turkey, and UN from the one side, and Russian Federation, Turkey, and UN from the other side, but it didn't play out all that well. And I'm going to talk about it in the final remarks of my speech, I suppose. Yeah, and the second largest category is losses caused by the lower harvest of annual crops. It's like $11.2 billion in lost revenue for farmers. And just to give you some kind of picture, our wheat harvest is like 1/3, is like 33% lower this year compared to the previous year. The barley, we have almost 40% lower harvest of barley compared to the baseline years, and pretty much the same picture we see for sunflower. The only less affected crop is corn. We have like almost 20% reduction, but these were preliminary estimates, and now we are seeing that, again, due to lower prices, sometimes farmers, and because of adverse weather, farmers are not so keen on even harvesting the planted crops. Yeah.
So this is a detailed overview of both the damages and the losses, both for machinery, infrastructural, but also for the actual product, for grain, wheat, oils, and everything.
Yeah. So on one hand, we have destruction of assets, and on the other hand, we have lost revenue because of the occupation. That's the first thing. And the other thing, I estimated that the weighted average reduction in domestic prices for export-oriented commodities like, again, sunflower, barley, wheat, corn, is like 60%. So before the Russian invasion, our Ukrainian producers received way more money for the harvest than now. And that's the biggest problem Ukrainian agriculture faces right now, because right now, in general, we used to have like 9 million hectares of winter crops. And winter crops is mainly wheat, rapeseed, and a few more. We potentially, after taking into account all the territories which are now occupied or were occupied but now liberated, we still have a potential to have like 6.6 million hectares of winter crops. Now we have only 4.5 million. So it's like 32% reduction compared to this year's harvest, and it's like 50% reduction from what we used to have. And the motivation for that is pretty straightforward. Our farmers they are not sure that they can make any profit out of their activities. They are upside down. If they decided to sell their harvest, they ended up losing. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, and I'm going to pass it further to Alexander here, that A, the loss is significant. There is no yet means to really rebuild it during the wartime. There's not only the loss, which is infrastructural, the actual crops, but also the loss of storage facilities, because we might have more than we can store, A, and then there's plenty of stuff that is occupied, B. Then what I see is that the demand for Ukrainian stuff is losing its power because we cannot really deliver that much because of the logistics problem. And here I jump to you, Alexander, with the question on how you project this situation is going to develop itself economically for the Ukraine in the upcoming year.
Well, as you've heard, the direct and indirect losses are enormous, right? So, and indirect losses are usually even higher because they engage like different industries and like a lot of things that are interconnected, and the supply chain and the value chain from the agri products is enormous. As you may probably know that, well, you definitely know this, that Ukraine struck the great deal with Russians with the support of the UN and Turkey. Due to this grain deal, we already managed to send more than 500 ships with, I guess, let me give you the number, with almost 12 million tons of agricultural products to the countries, more than 40 countries they need it the most. So we really hope that this grain deal is going to continue. So we're not allowing Russians to blackmail us to withdraw from the deal. And you've seen recently that they were put in place by Erdogan, and so luckily the deal is going to continue, and we will not be giving up, a lot of sacrifices that they're actually asking us to. Answering your question that the world is losing the demand capacity for Ukrainian grain products, well, yes and no, because there are not a lot of alternatives in the world. Like obviously Russia is also like the big grain supplier, and they're not coming back to the market in the nearest future due to the number of reasons, and primarily to the sanctions as well. So it looks like Ukraine is potentially like the only supplier to those at least developing countries that are looking for slightly cheaper products than the regular suppliers, like the traditional suppliers can offer. The things that we're undertaking as like before the grain deal started, there was like very massive and active attention put to the arrangements of the dry ports. The railway logistics is very bottlenecky, it's very complicated. But I see that the development in this direction is inevitable, because if we want to diversify the logistics, they want to diversify the ways how the grain's going to flow, we definitely need to have more options than just the sea. We have the river developments, like Danube is playing a little bit of a role in
but
that.
it was in drought during the summer.
Well, sure, it's not the best route as well, and it's also like you cannot bring the huge ships in there. It's just this.
But it's still a channel.
It's still a channel. It's still a channel. It's worth exploring. So, and it's one of the options. I do believe in development of more railway transport points, like maybe the automobile transport points. But that is all driven like The limited capacity is, of course, driven by the bottlenecks of the border crossing points. And we see that the Ministry of Infrastructure is going to change the name soon, is actually working in this direction, and with our international partners. And the grain traders, like the big ones, the internationals, the multinationals, they were also keen of investing into these dry ports. To some extent, when the grain deal happened, they all paused this activity. They said, oh, finally, we're going to get back to the sea. Now they see that it's not only like it's not 100% cure, so they need to be considering the dry ports again.
In the next step of our conversation, I'll get back to both of you with the question of investments and loans that Ukrainian and foreign banks are giving to Ukrainian agriculture or foreign agriculture companies that are present in Ukraine. But that's for later. I want to go for Damian here for a moment. World Central Kitchen is the immensely important organization which helps to tackle any food calamity and a crisis all over the world. And you've been very incremental in helping with the food crisis in Ukraine. I'm curious about how you went through this and what would be the key lessons that your organization and yourself would develop out of the crisis in the last 9 months.
So from the beginning of the crisis, from February, WCK showed up in Ukraine after 24 hours from the beginning. So actually in the 25th February, we were on the place. Since beginning, we serve in Ukraine 180 million meals and with 8,640, that's what I guess from the numbers yesterday, with the distro sites, shelters, and refugee centers. And now we are learning to...
And you serve them on the territory of Poland or in Ukraine? No, the shelters.
Now I'm talking about Ukraine. Now only about Ukraine, and we're trying to support also economy in Ukraine. That's why we're buying every projects, every stuff what we need to produce the food from local farmers, local companies, if it's possible. If not, then we have to order it from some other countries, for example, Poland and US. Same like a couple of months ago, we ordered for a our partner farmer with the truck of seeds. So we're trying to support every piece of project of food. So not only just cooking, but also the process in the farms.
What are the losses? So you're helping us with the immense amount of losses, but what are the key losses that you're seeing? To what are you helping actually?
And I think the biggest needed is in the zones, in the war zone. When there's connect to the people is very hard to do because they are covered for the soldiers and not everyone have access to go these areas. And because we are working from the beginning, we have good name in Ukraine and we can do it. And that's why I think this is most important thing to the war zone.
Understood. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Yaroslav, but also I know that I've learned that Alexander has to leave in 10 minutes, so we're going to make it quicker to you later. Yaroslav, I'm going to switch to Ukrainian now. So if you need headsets, please use those. По-перше, ваша компанія і Асоціація українських бізнесів у Польщі, ви багато робили для допомоги з релокації українським бізнесам ще до початку повномасштабної війни. Зараз для мене цікаво, як змінився, наскільки багато агрикалчурал компаній з'явилося
If they relocate to here, which elements of their companies they relocate here, what are their hopes for Poland and the trends that you can see? Thank you very much. If I may, very briefly, I'd like to talk about the current situation in the agricultural market and in export. Ukraine, 20 years ago, was able to feed 20 million people all over the world. Now it can provide for 400 million people it is the number of people. According to the most recent data, is the number of people that we can feed as the Ukrainian agriculture. But now the price of wheat is $123 this year due to the soaring increase of costs in CAD for logistics especially. The price went up to $330. So selling wheat is possible in Europe for $350. So we are talking about rising costs, logistical costs especially, and the prices have been soaring when we talk about supplies through the Rhine. These costs go up to $400, and the price goes up. I mean, the price goes up to $400. So before the war, Ukraine exported more or less 5 million tons of food produce per month through seaports, and now we have the food corridor. It is between 2.5 to 3 million tons. Yesterday, 523 ships started their journey with like 3 million tons, and capacity of seaports amounts to 3 million, more or less. So whatever we could achieve together with Polish and Romanian colleagues was like around 3 million tons of food, which are transported via land, mostly through railways. And now I'd like to say what kind of problems we are coming across and what kind of challenges we are facing. There is a problem connected with crossing of the borders, and here there is a bottleneck, namely the border, because we would need enhanced capacity of border crossings. I mean, it will not change the situation tremendously because the problem lies elsewhere, actually, namely, I could see it myself. I was quite surprised because in Ukraine we have 20,000 wagons which are adjusted to transportation of grains. Throughout Europe there are like 12,000 of wagons like that. So we have 80% of food transports are done via railways in Ukraine. In Europe it is happening on a much smaller scale. That's another thing. There is a situation with the rolling stock, including locomotives. There is a problem with the gauge, differences in the gauge of the railway tracks. So one of the options which would help us to increase the number of exporting seaports is Klaipėda. Due to lower reshipment of Belarusian and Russian cargo, Klaipėda is very much interested in receiving our goods, our commodities, our food. The problem is delivery of these products to Klaipėda. Once again, there is a problem of border crossings and various gauges of the railway tracks. In our case, in Lithuanian case, it is a broad gauge. In Poland, it is a narrow gauge of the railway tracks, and we can go to Lithuania only through Poland. As for Ukrainian business, I'd like to mention two alternative projects. I'm not going to talk about the economic efficiency, but we are thinking about the construction of a pipeline for transportation of oil. And the other project is like a kind of conveyor, perhaps, that would make it possible to transport grains and many other commodities. And that is why we would like to overcome a problem of this change of the gauge, differences in the railway track gauge and fast crossing of the border. But then development of terminals also is facing bottlenecks, and the business is trying to develop terminals. There are various projects connected with that. But as for the Ukrainian business, because you've asked a question about that, the main problem, the first options of relocation after opening of the European market and closing down of Russian market for our commodities, I'm talking about like 2015. So due to all these changes, an idea came up to create companies, setting them up abroad. And Ukrainian producers decided that they might set up their businesses abroad. And what are benefits for them? They are closer to their consumers, they diversify their risks, and they avoid problems with currency exchange rates, and they receive access to financing abroad. What they pay, where do they pay taxes? Well, we had a problem, and we had a discussion about that during Minister Bragmikich's times, whether we should put taxes on the business which registers the operation abroad. It is a separate topic for a discussion, but the answer is why the Polish, American, French governments support their companies registering their business entities abroad. The solution is simple: 95%. Basically, a vast amount of companies were relocated to Poland, but mostly there's SMEs, like 95% of them are SMEs, big business, basically doesn't often make such decisions. So I don't want to say here, well, basically, let me put it like that. We should be talking about investments, but especially we should think about our farmers. They are not like welcomed abroad because there is a lot of competition. Competition will continue. It will be like that in the future as well. We have to look for partners because then we can run various business activities jointly. Thank you very much for this broad approach
to what Yaroslav just said, specifically on Ukrainian businesses opening up offices in Poland and doing whatever they need to do in Poland and paying taxes here rather than in Ukraine, but still having some businesses left in Ukraine. I'm curious on how Ministry of Economic Development is looking at this. Are you supporting this idea, or this is not a problem at all? Please.
Well, in the agricultural sectors, it's pretty difficult, to move your manufacturing and production to other country because agri-production is all in the field, and the fields are on the soil, and the soil is in Ukraine. I think that if they move and create some representative offices which enables them to promote the exports through Poland, I don't see anything bad in there. If the issue is that they are outsourcing some processing to Poland, we're not encouraging that because we would rather have them arrange the food processing in Ukraine, and that's where the government is actually trying to support them to the full extent. So because like if you are just an agri-producer selling grains, the raw materials, you are not adding like huge amount of value to the economy, whilst if you're creating the value chain and then you're doing the food processing, you create from just the packaged grains to, I don't know, the bioethanol or the lysine, which is like the amino acid extracted from corn, then it's a completely different story. You're adding like 3, 4, or 5 times more value to the economy rather than just doing the raw products.
And this is great that you mentioned this because this added value thing, it becomes an opportunity right now, though it's horrible time, but then any horrible time is an opportunity. What exactly the ministry does to encourage Ukrainian producers to build refineries and processing facilities in Ukraine right now, and who invests in that?
Well, actually, we do try to support them, as we were discussing in the previous panel, that the Ukrainian government is providing the grants to the manufacturers. Unfortunately, we're quite limited in funds, and as I said to you before, we've received more than 14,000 applications for the different from different types of manufacturers. This is both the processing, production, and an agricultural field. We're supporting the greenhouses, the establishment of the new greenhouses, and the orchards, like the gardening business. We also working closely with the development finance institutions, as I said, like such as USAID, KfW, GIZ, EU for Business. They are also channeling their funds to support Ukrainian small and medium enterprises. Although they'll be much more efficient in the processing, in the food processing, to support the big shots, because like you could easily scale up the food processing to the big plants, to the big manufacturings. Like you can have tickets like $50 million, $150 million for the things that I mentioned. If you want to extract the bioethanol, you want to make it from corn, or if you want to make them some amino acids, you want to make the soy protein. This is at least $60, $70 million worth of investments. And we know that some of the Ukrainian companies are considering this. And with these big deals, how we try to arrange the support, we are becoming the facilitator between them and the foreign institutions, both international finance institutions like the EBRD, IFC, or recently the Development Finance Corporation from US has actually started providing the financing. They're considering deals both with direct lending, with credit risk coverages, where you can attract the commercial banks. European Investment Bank has recently gained the mandate to support not only public sovereign sector, but also the private sector. Yes, they have a threshold for the ticket. They say we're going to finance the deals that are at least 30 million euros, but this is exactly the case. So the government is supporting the small and medium enterprises, encouraging the like smaller farms to evolve, and even them moving to the processing, while we try to support the big ones, providing like the bridge between them and the big financial institutions.
Having said that, the last question to you, I'm going to let you go, is when Ukrainian businesses, small, medium, and large, are coming to the ministry right now, to you, the owners or the top manager, what are they saying? Please give us this, or please don't interrupt here. What is the demand right now from the Ukrainian business, from large to small, out of agriculture industry?
Well, they do actually ask for support. Like a lot of them have, like we talk about the big guys, they have a lot of overdue loan portfolios where they ask us to support them with the loan restructurings. Unfortunately, the investment banking sphere has also suffered among the other fields in Ukraine, and they are not as active as they used to be before. Like before, you could go and hire the consultant that would create the debt restructuring for you. Well, now they need to appeal to the government and to the institutions. Like we for instance, have a certain investment promotion platform that is called Advantage Ukraine, that is under the Ministry of Economy. We have hired the investment banking professionals there with the help of USAID. So we see that investment banks are laying off people while we are trying to get them involved. And these guys are really like investment professionals, and they do it for free. So they are just bridging, giving advice on how to restructure the debt portfolios. They're advising them how to refinance some of the debts and how to get the new debt and new support. So we are just micromanaging this. Unfortunately, that's the way to do it at the most.
Understand. Thank you so much for your time, Deputy Minister. I know you have to go, please.
Yes.
Please, thank you so much. We're going to move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming back to the Roman, to your research. So the question I have, which is very simple, do we have enough food in Ukraine to sustain? For how long? With this amount of loss and damage that we have, is the amount of food that we have is enough to actually feed ourselves and, let's say, Poland?
At this point, I want to highlight that at this point, everything more or less fine with the domestic food
But
security.
at this point?
At this point, because again, as I told earlier, we have like 50% reduction in the cultivated area for winter crops. So this year we had like 6.5 million hectares. Now we have 4.5. So that may be a problem. That's gonna be the problem because right now Ukrainian commercial farms don't have the liquidity, the means to conduct the operation. And even those who decided to start the sowing campaign, they used less fertilizers, they use cheaper seeds, they use cheaper crop protection measures, and that's going to affect yields as well. Regarding your question about the domestic food safety, security, two more things. I believe we're going to have enough grain, cereals, oilseeds to cover domestic consumption. We are not so sure that we will have enough to export at the pace we used to export. Regarding the domestic food security with physical food availability with other crops, everything is more or less fine there, more or less. Because quite a lot of food stuff other than oilseeds and grain is produced by household or by some small-scale farmers.
By the way, by the small scale farmers, I'm wondering whether this craft farmers industry of Ukraine, which is like smaller agriculture industry, do you see how damaged is that part? Because we've been talking mostly on big guys and middle-sized guys, but what about the small farmers?
They are more resilient than the large one. They are not, all of them, pretty much all of their production goes to the local market and they are not affected by these export disruptions. So everything is more or less fine as long as the areas are not occupied, not filled with mines, and so on and so forth.
Understood. Damian, coming back to you and the World Central Kitchen. If you would say that cooperation, one of the last panelists from the previous panel would say that the key lessons out of the 9 months of the war are these. A, if there's someone who wants to volunteer and help, don't interrupt, give a space to do this. B, coordinate on various levels, whether it's government or municipality or your own way. For your job, for what you did, and you've been doing in the last nine months, and for World Central Kitchen, what would be the best practices of cooperation as key lessons that you've learned? And who and which organizations or non-governmental or governmental have helped you the most to do your job?
I think, in my opinion, the biggest support for us is from United States because we get seeds, people with experience to teach the local farmers, small farmers in Ukraine, how to modern them farms, how to make it bigger, to grow up, to teach them, make some meetings for small groups of farmers. I think that is the most important thing, to inform them how to do that, to make it better. We have experience from Guatemala with the farmers. We're supporting them since 2014. So we have experience with that, with a very difficult land to grow some, for example, sunflowers. But in Ukraine, the ground is perfect, the weather is perfect, so that, in my opinion, the small farms will be much more helpful.
The experience that you're receiving in this last 9 months, if you would say, these are the know-hows, or these are the new ideas that we can actually spread to the world, to Guatemala and other countries, what would be that experience? I can rephrase if you want.
It's hard to say, to be honest, because I'm not exactly in the project in Guatemala or Puerto Rico. So I'm focused on Poland and Ukraine.
And the learnings from Poland then, what would be those learnings out of this Ukrainian experience that you're having right now?
I think in Poland it will be most focus for the small companies, for the private persons. I think the huge risk is for these small companies and the private farms, because the huge companies, they are fine, they have experience, they have money, but the small ones, not every time. For example, from Ukraine government, it's hard to get some support. That's why organizations like World Central Kitchen or many another ones from around the world should to focus on the small one to still keep going and growing up.
If I'm a farmer, how do I know that you can help me?
Actually, on our website in wck.org,
I don't know where the website is. I'm just
you
a
can
farmer.
find it's wck.org, and there is a link to find. Every farmer can ask for a support, for grants, for loans, for any another one.
Understood. There was a curiosity if I'm a small farmer, how do I really learn about you so I can really get this support if I can't get it, let's say, from the government. Thank you for that. Coming back to Yaroslav, I'm going to switch to Ukrainian again. Українська. Ми подивилися на втрати інфраструктурні, втрати в можливостях зберігати, логістичні втрати. Ми подивилися на те, як відкривається український бізнес в Польщі зараз, якщо говорити про
how the Ukrainian business was opening up in Poland. So as we're discussing business for farming, etc. So as we're talking about increasing the added value in production. So Alexander was speaking about it. So you said that European money was more easily available to Ukrainian entrepreneurs, so they could have these money cheaper and available for investment. So do you have any success stories and the cases of multiplying them? It was not only the Ukrainian business, but other global businesses. 3-5 years ago, they restructured their businesses by using customs-free areas, and then the situation changed because of anti-money laundering laws and bank secrecy, and then the beneficiary owner regulations. So here we're encouraged the organizations and entrepreneurs to look at things from the point of view of access to easy money, and the interest rate was at 1.5%. Cheap money it's been always here, and besides, Poland has been the biggest beneficiaries of the EU. Between 2004 to 2020, Poland received 100 billion euro and that was the financing, and this is non-returnable. That came here to stay. So that's the money that entered Poland, and for the budgetary period, Poland has been assigned 130 billion euro. There are some debates in Poland and in the EU, and there are some political differences in terms of how the money should be used. But we're looking forward to receiving the money. How the Ukrainian businesses are planning to make use of the funding. So if a Ukrainian investor establishes or sets up a legal entity in Poland, then they have access to the funds. Well, the beneficiary owner's nationality is not the issue here. You enjoy equal rights on par with the Polish entities, like Polish investors, Polish beneficiary owners. So as of today, there are several levels of availability, eligibility. So there are loans and leasings, and globally there are 4 types of own financial resources. So it's money abroad, and well, you cannot build your business based on your own money. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, you do it in a very different way. Then obviously there are loans. Loans are more expensive because of high interest rates. Then we have investment, and investment is then another type of concept where investors can invest in such entities, and then businesses can be built from all these elements and have set up a legal personality. So let me give you an example. Konsevenko, a company from Ukraine that operated in Ukraine and before the war was employing 920 people, producer of semi-trailers and trailers to agricultural and farming machinery. 3 years ago, we assisted them in entering the EU market, and now they're set up their own production facility there with 130 employees, and they received co-financing of 4.5 million euro. How about Ukraine? Well, the business is still there and operating. So here we have a debate with the ministry and other authorities, but they do not entirely see the added value they produce. Because if they operate nowadays in the same way as they did in Ukraine, they pay taxes as they did in Ukraine, but on top of that, they expand, and with the income, the revenues can be reinvested into their own business. Thank you for the explanation. Do you see any growth of prices of agricultural products that were triggered by the war? Obviously. Well, as I was saying, the whole thing affected the logistics, and that translates onto the bigger picture, into the bigger picture. Well, the entire Russian invasion, how many food farmers and producers entered the Polish market? Do you know? Well, I can only speak about those who receive our help. We have more than 230 entrepreneurs who came over to the Polish market, and they're operating on a bigger scale, and we can see their geometrical growth. And as for now, the business is unable to see the perspective of the end of the conflict.
On basically what to do with this. So we know the data of the losses, we know the data of the damages, we know we almost know how many businesses have moved out, relocated. We know that there's a struggle with logistics, we know that there's damage to logistics, we know that we're constantly being jeopardized by Russian agents and like Hungary, let's say, in the desire to help us with logistics and other things. So there's a lot of challenges, but also those are the opportunities. And I'm curious, what is that your research can tell us as the opportunity for Ukrainian agricultural sector in the upcoming month and years?
Actually, there's kind of a difference between what's needed for the full reconstruction and recovery of the whole commercial agricultural production in Ukraine, of the whole Ukrainian agriculture, if you will, and what's needed right here and right now. And today, I would rather prefer to focus on what's needed here and now and what you can do to reconstruct and to recover Ukrainian agricultural production. The number one problem is that lower prices for export-oriented commodities because of Russia, again, nothing new. And farmers don't have any liquidity. Farmers don't have enough revenue to recoup costs and to keep the production rolling. So the number one problem we have is with the grain deal and grain corridor. If anyone in this room hears that, okay, Russia fixed the problem, and so on and so forth, and now everything is more or less fine, now everything is rolling, the grain is moving, and so on and so forth, that's a lie. What Russia does right here and right now, he is sabotaging grain exports from Ukraine. Russia created a bottleneck. It's the inspection of vessels with grain and oilseed on the Bosphorus trade. It should be a joint inspection by Ukrainian side, Turkey, United Nations, and Russia. Right now, they are processing about 8 vessels a day or something like that. But when Russia said, okay, we are not happy with this deal, we're gonna leave. And we started to do all these inspections with just 3 of the sides, Ukraine, Turkey, and United Nations. We had 46 inspections of vessels per day. Russia is they are trying to sabotage as much as possible. And if in October we exported like 3.5 million tons of grain through the grain corridor, in this month, in November, I believe, it's 2.3 million, so it's quite a reduction. It's minus 1.2 million tons of grain and oilseeds in a month. So they're doing as much as they can, trying to hold this whole process. And just for general understanding is that we can ramp up our export by additional 3 million tons of grain and oilseed a month without any changes, just without the sabotage from Russia. So the first thing you have to do is just talk, say, discuss. Grain deal is not working. Russia is sabotaging, and everything is going to hell right now. Because again, we had 3.5 million, now we have 2.3, and we don't see any prospects in it.
So it's just the news that are saying that the grain deal is working, but the data says that the grain deal is actually declining, not working. But what about this grain from Ukraine thing?
That's a separate story. That's a separate story. That's the story of some countries, some organizations buying grain from Ukraine and exporting them this grain to some problems with acute food insecurity. I'm not talking about this exact program. I'm just talking about this whole thing with Russia. And just to be clear, what 3 million tons of grain per month means, 1 ton of wheat can feed 1 million tons of wheat can feed approximately 60 million people for a month. So we are talking about huge numbers, really huge numbers there. And again, the domestic prices here in Ukraine, because without proper domestic prices, the whole commercial agriculture and production here in Ukraine is gonna come to a halt, okay? That's the first problem, the first priority. The second one also comes from lower domestic prices and lack of opportunities to keep the production rolling. Ukrainian commercial agriculture producers, small farmers, they need injection of liquidity. They need some sort of grants, they need loans, whatever they can, because the financing options are extremely limited. They're literally non-existent for small-scale agriculture. And the third problem we have is a problem with mining pollution. We have huge territories that are currently in danger of mines and so on and so forth. And the problem is, if you are a farmer who is not so lucky enough and you used to operate in certain regions of your country, you don't have any options how you can keep the production rolling, because you can call up the state emergency service and say, hey, I have a potentially some farmland with potential of mining pollution, and then gonna come and just place some flags, okay, the danger area and so on and so forth, but they don't have the capacity to demine this farmland. There are 1, maybe 2 commercial demining companies. They're working totally officially, but their capacity is not enough, and we don't have a proper market for the demining. If you want to return as much land as possible back to production, it could be like approximately 80% of all lost farmland we can recover in a year, in a couple of years, because most of these lands are not that polluted with mines and unexploded ordnance, okay? And using some simple non-technical inspections and so on and so forth, you can easily come return it back to the service. But we need the capacity, we need to keep, and probably the best way to do it is to allocate some grants and create a few private companies that gonna focus precisely on the demining. Because if you are head of the region and you have like 10 brigades of miners, you have to allocate these resources. They must demine either cities, some projects, or the farmland. And the farmland is really low in the list of priorities.
Out of 100% of available harvesting options, how many are mined right now that we know, that we are aware? Out of the 100% that we have, which is not the 100 that we had last year, but out of those which are available to harvest, the lands, how many are mined?
It's like many million hectares of farmland.
And in percentage, if you know it, so we are aware.
We can say how much is actually mined. We are saying that we have like 10 million hectares in risk of mining pollution.
Understood. So, with closing remarks right now, I'm going to jump. First of all, thanks a lot for the lot of data. This is not optimistic at all. That's what I want to say. This more of a plea, appeal to the audience for the financial support, at least, in order for the companies of our agriculture sector of Ukraine to survive through this. Yeah, but this is also the important data on where we are actually right now. Okay, I'm going to jump into conclusions with you. I mean, for WCK, World Central Kitchen, what would be the next important and necessary steps that you're going to take in Ukraine with your service? And what kind of resources that you need for that?
For now, we need to focus actually WCK is focused for a cook, for a production of the food to feed the people. And the biggest issue is the access for some of products, because the farmers cannot produce it and the quality is too low to produce. So I think the most important thing is now to support these farmers with the seeds, equipment, information how to do that. And that's the point, to help them with rise up the production.
Understood, thank you on that. Ярославе, завершимо разом з вами. Це такий як фінальний крок. І це не те, щоб порада, але те, що вам здається необхідним зазначити, на чому варто
What about your
сфокусуватися.
perspective? Do you have any advice? What is necessary? What we should focus on, both from your perspective and the perspective of the agricultural sector? You've already asked this question to Alexander, because you were asking about what the government can do for business, not to disturb, not to interfere, I would say, but on the other hand, whatever the business needs is understanding and support. So let me give you an example. In Poland, everything that we need to do is to carry out a certain, in Ukraine, sorry, let me rephrase it. In Ukraine, we should create new institutions, like institutions supporting business, because in Poland there is a great system of supporting business, starting from the Polish Fund for Enterprise Development and finishing at KUKA, which is insurance solutions. So there are like 4 or 5 institutions which support business in a very intense way, helping entrepreneurs, and both in Ukraine and Poland, I can compare both situations. I would say that thanks to decentralization in Poland, there is a lot of support for businesses since 2006. I'm not idealizing Poland, but since the head of the commune, at every level up to the minister, everyone supports business in Poland. No one is thinking, like our deputy minister, whether we should support those in Ukraine or those who have left abroad. No. Support in Poland is like a total support. You support investors, you support taxpayers, you are trying to support businesses in various ways in Poland. So now in Ukraine, we need to understand what is useful and necessary for the Ukrainian business, and then this kind of support needs to be provided. The government can do that, the state can do that. It may be support in logistics, infrastructure, development of various infrastructural projects. And obviously we can we can see some problems even at the level of communication with the authorities of the Republic of Poland. Now I'm talking as the head of the Association of Ukrainian Business in Poland. We can talk very well with Polish ministries at all the level. Every proposal is communicated directly to the ministry So this communication is much better with Polish ministries than communication with Ukrainian ministries at the level of a Ukrainian embassy in Warsaw. Yes, there is some support. Obviously, competition has always been in place. It will continue to be so, but we can convince the Polish business that running a business in Ukraine is safe. It is feasible. They can do it. Of course, if you talk about the protection of your rights in the context of fighting against corruption. Now I can see many possibilities, many opportunities in functioning of agricultural business. I can see that competition is in place, but perhaps we should focus more on cooperation. In Ukraine, our Ukrainian farmers have excellent land, soil, human capital, various resources. In Poland, there is a lot of expertise, qualified farmers. So let us not think about competition. Let us think more about cooperation. So let us think about that. Let us think about development of food processing, because yes, it is about added value. It may be one of Ukraine's assets. A very important thing is that in this context is using simply some support from the Polish government.
I'm going to switch to English. I see that you had something to say about this, and I'm happy that this is a discussion way, so we're not all aligned in this. So how we went through the panel, we overviewed the immense amount of losses and damages to Ukrainian agricultural sector within the infrastructural, logistics, the actual crops, the mined fields, then the amount of absolutely lost and damaged products that were stolen and brought to Russia, if I'm not mistaken, and many thousands of tons of that stolen by Russians. That's what you mentioned as well, the crops and everything. We went through the current problems with logistics and how can we dwell on that and deliver the solutions over there. We've seen what was the World Central Kitchen effort into helping in Ukraine, what kind of resources that you needed and what actually helped, the way you coordinated. We've seen the data on how terrible is the situation and the appeal to the broader audience on what should be done and what could be done with the investments aid, but also spreading the information and being aware of the situation. Right now, more or less, there's enough food for Ukraine, but then it's not enough food for the world in a way. But also what you've said and what the Deputy Minister said, that the amount of interest to Ukrainian products is decreasing a bit because it's harder for us to deliver the goods. So these are the, unoptimistic but very realistic thoughts from the panelists. And Roman, you want to say something in the end? This is going to be the last thing.
Yeah, it's just a small comment. We talked about physical food security. Food security has two sides. One is physical food security, whether you have food or not in this region, in this city, in this village, and economic access to food security. We will have food like physically, but at the same time, we might have substantial problems with access to this food, the economic side of the food security.
Thank you for that. I see questions from the audience, but we are so much out of time. Can you please come there and we'll talk in private in a moment with those that you want to talk to? And they will give you the answer. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the panel, dear panelists. I want to ask for the round of applause. Yeah, but I ask you if you could do it in private because there's another panel coming. Thank you so much for that. Thanks to the panelists, Yaroslav Romanchuk, Damian Sobel, Roman Naters, and Alexander Hriban. Thank you so much for that.